So I've been working as a recruiter for the past 8 years. As you can imagine, I've seen a lot of CVs in my time. Good CVs, bad CVs, and some that are just, I don't even know, they're just the worst. But I've always wondered how many CVs I've probably seen in my career, so I sat down fairly recently and I made a rough calculation, and I think it sounds crazy to say, but I've probably read about 160,000 CVs. So if you can imagine that I've read a couple of hundred every day for weeks and months and years, it soon adds up, and you can probably see how I got to that amount. But yeah, so I thought I'd make a video and we can go through what I think makes a good CV and a bad CV. So there's lots of points that you probably would think is quite obvious, but there's also some things in there that people do and I just don't understand why. But that's enough from me, so let's jump into what I think makes a good CV. A lot of people fall into the trap of trying to make a good CV overcomplicated, but a good CV should be clear, concise, bullet pointed, easy to read, accurate, factual, and in a nice Word document. That's it. Nothing else. You don't need to try and make things super complicated. I would recommend using a Google Doc template for CVs, and as you're writing your CV out, I would say use something like Grammarly so you can check formatting, don't have spelling mistakes, and you can also use like a thesaurus feature and make some words a little bit more interesting if you needed to, that is. CV doesn't need to be more than 1 or 2 pages. Sometimes people go rogue here and they make CVs like 5-10 pages, which really isn't needed, because anyone that's actually gonna look at a CV, they're not gonna look at that thing for more than 7 seconds, 10 seconds max. Because if you sit in there and you've got an inbox full of CVs for some kind of job, you're not gonna sit there and read every single thing, because there's no point. So you're looking for the highlights, you're looking for keywords, and you're looking for companies that you probably recognize as well. A surefire way to make sure you end up in the no pile on CVs being reviewed when applying for a job would be to make your CV unreadable and way too long. So keep it punchy, keep it short, keep it to the point, and save those finer details for when you're in an actual interview. Now, if you're posting your CV online, you don't want to share too many details, so maybe just keep your mobile number and email address. So stay away from putting your home address and too many personal details. Now, you're probably thinking I'm being paranoid, and you're saying,
"Oh, Scott, why do I not need to put that? No one's gonna do anything."
Well, you never know who's on the internet, so you don't want to get scammed or robbed or someone turning up your house for some reason. So just keep the bare minimum details on there. So let's say you did want to put a location where you're based, you could put maybe just the town. So if you lived in, let's say you lived in Manchester, rather than putting your street, home address, postcode, you might just put Manchester. That's it. You don't need to go into any more details. If someone is looking for a job in that area and they can see that's where you're based, then I'm sure they can probably work out that you're in a commutable distance. It's not like you're traveling from one country to another, or I don't know, from London to Manchester, where that commute is just going to be ridiculous. Or potentially you're going to be a relocator. Now here it's quite common as well for people, when they are in a different country, to try and keep that address on their CV. So then they'll apply for a job, let's say that's based in the UK. You give them a call and say, "Hey, are you relocating? Are you based here?" And they'll say, "No, I'm not. Can the job be remote?" So a lot of people waste time there as well. Some people try and get around this by saying they're actually in the country, or they're in different parts of the country, using generic postcodes and stuff like that. So again, this is some things that people try and do. I don't know why. It's not like you can cheat the system and you can suddenly turn up on the first day if you're going to be in another country. So I don't know why people do it. Another obvious thing here would be to keep it professional. So if you're going for a job as an accountant, for example, you don't need to put how many Instagram followers you've got, or you don't need to put how you have got your 50 meters swimming badge in year 10. You don't need to put that information. It's just completely pointless. But people do put this on there. I don't know why. It's just not relevant at all. I mean, if you were going to be a social media marketing manager, then yeah, make sure you've got how many Instagram followers you've got on some kind of personal page or something like that. Yeah, that probably can't hurt because it's relevant to the job. Now, when you're saving your CV and naming the document, you want to make sure you've got it as something pretty simple. So maybe just your first name, last name, and CV. If you've got more than one version, you might put the year, or maybe you might put version 1 or version 2, but that's it. You don't want to put some kind of random multi-digit number, I don't know, weird title, because people are going to look at that and go, "What the hell is this?" Or even worse, you could just get lost in the pile and it's not as easy for someone to go and look through their CVs or inbox or some kind of CRM system if they want to find your CV. It's just not going to do you any favors, to be honest. Now, you want to make sure you have a professional sounding email address, or at the very least, not something wacky. Even if it's just your first name or your second name or something like that at Hotmail or a Gmail, then that's nice and easy. But you'd be surprised the number of people that put XX_sexydevil@hotmail.com or something like that. And it just looks crazy. And I don't think people ever really think about this and go, oh, this might not make me look very good, applying for some kind of professional job. So it's easy, it takes 2 minutes. You can go and set up a new Gmail address within like 30 seconds. Okay, maybe not 30 seconds, but maybe like 2 minutes at least. So, it's not a big issue. So you should be able to do that pretty quick. Sometimes when I'm on the phone to someone, if I'm going through their CV, when they're applying for a job, I'll double check their email address, and sometimes you can hear if they're actually embarrassed about their email address that they've got, and then most people say, well, yeah, I need to change that at some point. So yeah, make sure you've got a professional email address. Now we've covered some of the basics, let's go into some more of the actual details of what actually going to be on CV and what makes it good. So the CV should be simple and clear. Again, like I said before, should be bullet pointed, nice and easy to read, a couple of paragraphs max, and it doesn't need to go into too much detail. So here you want to mention facts and things that you've done. It sounds obvious again, but make sure it's all true, because the last thing you want to do is to get into an interview situation and for someone to question you on something you haven't done, and then you're sitting there and sweating and you're like, yeah, I know how to do that. And then even worse than that is you get the job and then you're sitting there and you have no idea what to do. So if you are an Excel whiz and you are amazing at doing Excel documents and formulas and all this kind of stuff, if that's true, then put it on your CV. If it's not, don't, because the last thing you want to do is someone to say, oh, John's great at Excel documents, get him on the job, and then the next thing you know, you're sitting there trying to do some formula in front of someone and you don't know what you're doing, and then you look like an absolute idiot. All we're trying to do here is make it easy for a prospective employer or a recruiter to say yes and say this is the person that can do the job. So something else you want to bear in mind is staying away from terrible formatting. So don't use childish fonts like Snap ICT or Comic Sans, or colors like red or blue or grey or something like that where it's not going to look right. So just want to keep it nice and simple. So Arial, Times New Roman, Calibra, I think that's how you pronounce it. And probably size wise, something like a 10 or a 12. You don't want to go bigger than that or smaller, because it's not going to look right and it's going to be hard to read, and then someone's going to have to zoom in and then they can't read the sentences, or you make all the words too big and the formatting is going to be all over the place. So just try and make it nice and simple. Even if you're like a graphic designer or some kind of creative person and you want to showcase your skills, that's great, but on your CV it's probably not the place to do that. That's where you're going to have a portfolio and you're going to show the work that you've done in the past. You might have some kind of website that's going to go through your details, mention projects that you've worked on and skills, and giving examples of your work. But your CV's not that. Your CV is just showing what you've done, where you've done it, and for how long you've done it. That's it. So it's key to emphasize your accomplishments, what you've done in your personal life and your career. So if you've done something like you have run the London Marathon, that's seen as probably something that's quite impressive. So maybe put that on your CV. But maybe you've done something that's a little bit more practical that's related to your jobs. You might have increased sales by 200% by using a certain implementation of a software. Mention that. Maybe you've managed a team of 5 people who were the highest performing team in the company. But here it is also key to make sure that you don't say something that isn't necessarily an accomplishment. So let's say you work in retail, you don't need to put that you're a keyboarder, because you're kind of clutching at straws there for accomplishments, as horrible as that may sound. By doing some research, you can make sure that your CV is tailored correctly for the job that you're applying for. Here it is important, again, if you can, to make sure that all your skills match. If you do that, you're going to have a much higher chance of achieving an interview. Again, this is probably pretty obvious, but don't put that you've got skills that you don't have. So if someone needs to have a degree that is relevant to rocket science, don't say that you've done a degree in rocket science if you've actually done it in music, because again, these things aren't going to help, but you'll be surprised the number of people that do these on their CV. If you are lucky enough to receive an interview request for the job that you applied for, again, you want to make sure you do your research. So by doing your research, you can prepare for any questions that come up, and then you'll know the job more, you'll know the company more, and you'll seem much better suited, rather than turning up unprepared and just hoping for the best. Again, this is a common area which people fall down on. It's just by not reading job specs and not doing any preparation. As the old saying goes, if you fail to prepare, then you better prepare to fail. Some people have their interests on their CV. Now, this is a tough one. For me personally, I'm not sure that's something that you need to necessarily put on there. If you put on your CV that your interests are going on holiday or drinking cocktails cocktails, then it's not going to make you look good. It's not professional. It's not something that you need on there. But if you have something that could seem remotely relevant for the job that you're going for, then you may want to put this on there. So if you're working in sales, for example, let's say you are captain of a rugby team or a football team or something like that, people will probably like that because that shows you're competitive and you're outgoing, which is probably needed for those kind of jobs. If you are, let's say, a software engineer or some kind of technical engineer of some sort, then if you put that you are interested in chess, for example, then that probably shows that you've got problem solving skills and you are methodical, pragmatic, and you like to think ahead, I guess. Again, only put that if that is true. If you have no hobbies, that's fine, but here, just try and keep things as professional as you can. It is a thin line and it can be hard to make a judgment call on this, but I'll leave that down to you. But the best way to try and play this is thinking, if someone applied for a job that you had and you saw that on their CV, what would you probably think? So if you have a portfolio of work, this is something that you can accompany your CV or your job application for. So again, this is something that you want to make sure is relevant to what you do. So if you're applying for some kind of creative job, let's say a marketing job, or you're going for a graphic design job or video editing or something like that, it's important to make sure you can have examples of your work, because you can just put a link on this on your CV, which people can copy and paste, or you can show your website, or you can have some kind of example. Now for references, I don't think that you need them on your CV. You could just put references on request. That's something that is nice and simple and you don't need to give too much detail of other people. Now with references, most people just put references on request. They don't give any details of maybe their line manager or previous line managers. But let's say you do get a job and the new employer wants to go back to your previous line manager and get a reference. You're going to want to make sure that the people that you do put down as your references are going to give you good ones. Most people probably just confirm dates and stuff nowadays, but you don't want anyone to give you a bad reference. Now it's hard for people to give you bad references, but people will be able to read between the lines. But generally speaking, you're probably not going to get too much on references. From a legal point of view, people don't want to open themselves up to any kind of disrepute by giving a bad reference or something which they could potentially get held against them at some point by the candidate who's going forward for a job. Now something else that's kind of attached to a CV but doesn't necessarily always come up is a cover letter. To me, a cover letter is something that's quite old, and that is a very old process in terms of companies that want cover letters on their applications or on their job application process. I would say probably an email would just do fine. If you're contacting a hiring manager about a job or HR, you might just say, "Hi so-and-so, please find attached my CV. I'm very interested in this role as I have a background in this, this and this. I've been doing it for 5 years plus. I know about your company because I had a friend who used your products once and I loved it. I'd really like the opportunity to speak with you guys in more detail. Something, you know, hope to hear from you, kind regards." So it looks like you've done your research, looks like you've taken an interest, but I wouldn't say a long formal letter is needed. Again, it's probably quite an old process, so I wouldn't personally do it. I've never had one, and I would say I probably see maybe one cover letter in maybe 100 CVs. It's just not something that people really do nowadays. In my opinion, I could be wrong, but that's kind of what I see. Hopefully my points that I've gone through will help you make your CV better and improve your chances of getting your dream job. If there's anything that you think I might have missed out, please comment below and I'll respond and I'll give you my opinion. If you would like to see more videos like this, then please hit the subscribe button, which should be somewhere down here. And yeah, that's all for today. So until next time.